Welcome back to BLOCKTV. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is set to testify in the House of Representatives later today in an effort to ease tensions and alleviate the fears of legislators over his company's Libra digital asset project. In a 7-page document that includes prepared remarks by Zuckerberg has already made the rounds and offers us a bit of a glimpse of what the head of the world's most used social media company has to say. BLOCKTV senior correspondent Asher Westrop Evans joins me now in the studio. You got a chance to look at these documents. We want to break them down and set the stage for the drama later in the day. Now, like we said, it's a 7-page document. We're not going to read the whole thing out, but there are a couple of doozies in there that paint a bit of a better picture of what's to be expected. Yeah?
Right, certainly, Ron. I mean, throughout this document, there's some themes that start to break through, and I've chosen a few different quotes and ideas that I think can nail some of those important themes I think Zuckerberg is trying to touch on in the testimony later today. All right, so starting off, there's a quote I believe sort of highlights his notion of innovation. So it goes, "I believe this is something that needs to get built, but I understand we're not the ideal messenger right now. We've faced a lot of issues over the past few years, and I'm sure people will wish it was anyone but Facebook putting this idea forward." There he is. He's laying it right out there.
Right.
He understands the concern. He is addressing that he does understand what the problem is with Facebook, the image and tarnish that Facebook has faced in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, among others, the issues around privacy, the issues around antitrust, the issues around particularly partisanship and politics in the United States. Facebook is at the center of all those, and really for them to be leading this potentially massively disruptive technology, Zuckerberg recognizes it's a problem.
So not the ideal messenger, and he gets into it later and why that's the wrong way to look at it because they're not the real messenger. But just putting this in context, so he's going to speak before the House Financial Services Committee, headed by arch nemesis at this stage, Maxine Waters. We know that Libra's already had their day in front of the lawmakers there, David Marcus, which is already 3 months ago. But they weren't. The committee wasn't settling just for Marcus. They wanted to speak to the head honcho, Zuckerberg, and he's coming up. And like you said, opening statement: we're aware we're not the ideal messenger. Maybe it would have been preferable if Facebook wasn't spearheading this, and later he goes, maybe not even involved. Right. Take it away. What's the next part?
Yeah, so I mean, he says that they would prefer that Facebook wasn't spearheading this. They understand the concerns, but that he goes to great lengths to stress that this is something that needs to be done. This is not some sort of vanity project. This is an essential project. And he lays out a couple of reasons here. So he starts with, and I'll quote, "While we debate these issues, the rest of the world isn't waiting. China is moving quickly to launch similar ideas in the coming months. Libra will be backed mostly by dollars, and I believe will extend America's financial leadership as well as our democratic values and oversight around the world. If America doesn't innovate, our financial leadership is not guaranteed." Wow, Ron.
Right.
He is playing into those cards of the sort of global battle for fiscal and trade policy, something that could find some sympathies, particularly among the Trump administration. Right. He is talking about the concerns of America's global financial leadership, making this a patriotic issue, a sort of national control issue.
And this is just a reminder, and this was put out as a global project, that is going to solve the unbanked issues across the world. Here he's focusing in on the U.S. Obviously, he's speaking to U.S. legislators, but really, like you said, playing on these concerns, right?
I mean, he's creating this, or playing into this rather, clash of civilizations narrative, which actually has in many ways been aided and abetted by China's launch of their central bank digital currency, the plans to launch their central bank digital currency, which they even said in a lot of official documentation that came out was, coming out in response to Libra and the pushes from there. So there were these counteracting narratives of, the West is going for Libra, so we'll have to develop, our own central bank digital currency, and then, there's sort of Telegram going on in Russia or whatever's happening with the TON network. There is this clash of civilization narrative coming on in regards to the digitizing of monetary policy, and Libra is trying to frame itself, and Zuckerberg is trying to frame Libra as the main sort of representative of, I guess, the Western bloc in this sense. But he goes on to double down on this idea. He says, and I'll quote again, "I understand people have concerns about Libra, but I think it would be bad for our country and the world if companies were discouraged from taking on challenges like these and settle for safer options that reinforce the status quo." So
again,
Yeah,
innovation is in our hands.
Exactly.
Don't you dare, U.S. legislator, don't you dare stop this because we're going to be out of the race, and that'll have consequences in the decades and centuries to come.
Exactly. I mean, but effectively saying this is the essence of what it means for the Western capitalist, liberal democratic model is to allow this sort of innovation to move forward into innovate and not accept the status quo. I mean, that is essentially the sentiment that Zuckerberg is putting out there in this grand overarching narrative. And I think that's where he sees, perhaps rightly so, the strength of it. Let's get out of the nitty-gritty, who's involved, who's not involved. We're trying to make this a project for all, but actually playing into that clash of civilizations narrative that might gain some traction at the moment, as I said, particularly in the Trump administration, which wants to play into that.
Definitely speaking to the convinced there, preaching to the choir, at least to some of the U.S. demographics. But he it's not all grandstanding, it's not all showboating. He also recognizes some of the criticisms, right?
Yeah, so it's not all rah-rah. He does address that there will have to be some limitations and regulations put in place. He's not going out there to take on Congress as a whole. So he made a point where he states that, he sort of talks about the fact that we understand people think we're moving too fast as a project.
Which there's merit to that argument. I mean, we never even heard about Libra 6 months ago,
exactly.
and now it's already
dominating every element of the headlines. And then he goes on to say, and I'll quote again, he says, "Second, some have suggested that we intend to circumvent regulators and regulations. We want to be clear, Facebook will not be a part of launching the Libra payment system anywhere in the world unless all US regulators approve it. And we support Libra delaying its launch until it has fully addressed US regulatory concerns." Now, at face, there's not that much in this. They've already said in the past that they're working with regulators. Libra, unlike some other projects, let's say Telegram, for example, have been very open about wanting to work with regulators. But Ron, there's an interesting language that's being used here.
Yeah, break that down for us.
So we support Libra delaying its launch. Facebook will not be part of launching the Libra payment system. There's Facebook and there's Libra. And the two are very distinct, and that is
in his mind.
In his mind, exactly, and that is a very interesting point. Obviously, coming at the time when Libra has now officially signed its initial charter with its initial members, they've elected a board, and now the narrative coming through this is, all right, I came before Congress, fine, but actually, I'm not the guy you want to talk to. I'm not on the Libra board. This has nothing to do with me. Facebook is but, a humble investor, developer, whatever, one among many in this project, much less than they had wanted it to, now we're down to 21 from the 28, but still, one among 21 original founding members. We're of no more significance than anyone else. Never mind the fact that we designed this project, never mind the fact that David Marcus, our employee, is still the chairman of the board. Yeah. This has nothing to do with us, and I'm not the guy you want to be talking to.
Yeah.
It's could be construed as a rather conniving approach, as a bit of corporate chicanery going on there.
Nicely put, yes.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how Congress reacts to this, and whether they're willing to buy into this narrative and actually say, okay, fine, you're not the guy we need to talk to anymore. You've put the distance in. We'll abide that, or actually there'll be this attitude of, yes, but you are Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. This came from Facebook. This was developed by Facebook's engineers, and at the end of the day, you are the parents of this particular project.
And it's also interesting here the language he's using. So he's talking about regulators and regulations. So that's not only Congress, and not only the lawmakers, but also like the enforcement agencies of the U.S. Bureaucracy, and that they want to cooperate. So it's not clear how much of an impact even this hearing is going to have. I mean, are we looking at legislation down the line that's going to be specifically tailored to Libra, to Facebook? A lot of questions around there, and there it's going to be interesting, especially to watch how the lawmakers react to those kind of statements.
Yeah, it certainly will. I mean, it'll be interesting to look at that from with the David Marcus hearing, we very much saw there was a lot of showboating. There was a lot of congressmen and women getting their moment in the sun to really put down their remarks in public, making a lot of grand statements. Wasn't necessarily a lot that came directly out of that. I mean, you could argue this hearing now with Zuckerberg came as a response to the Marcus statement, where many congresspeople were calling for Zuckerberg. We don't want Marcus, we want Zuckerberg. But it is interesting. But Zuckerberg also made pains to address the wider issue as well. I just want to touch on that.
Yeah.
He addressed beyond the United States the concerns of central banks generally, which
we've heard a lot. We've heard from the Europeans, definitely from the Russians, Chinese, Americans. I mean, everybody who's in charge of a central bank around the world has thoughts about this.
Exactly, because of the impact that this could have on central bank policies around the world, on domestic economies, and the impact of central banks to control. And I'll quote from Zuckerberg's statement where he says, "Monetary policy is the province of central banks, not Libra. The Libra Association has no intention of competing with any sovereign currencies or entering the monetary policy arena. It will work with the Federal Reserve and other central banks responsible for monetary policy to make sure that is the case." So again, really trying to address the more global concerns there. We're not trying to be a central bank. We're not trying to usurp the powers of central banks. And even though we are touching on their territory in terms of having a basket of currencies and whatnot that will be controlled in a separate reserve, held in Swiss vaults, whatever, we're not actually trying to impact central bank policy, monetary policy around the world. Which is of particular note, Ron, given statements we heard coming from David Marcus earlier this week, in which he implied that Libra could be willing to change its whole structure and format. So up until now, we've had the basket of currencies approach. They even release 50% US dollars. I can't remember the exact numbers, but a certain number of pounds, euros, yen. A certain split of all these currencies that would be used to artificially keep the currency stable. Now, Marcus floated the idea of actually, no, we might just do a series of separate coins, digital coins, effectively just classic stable coins pegged to specific currencies, one US dollar coin, one euro coin, one yen coin, one pound coin, and they would be pegged to their respective currencies, but obviously tradable throughout the Libra network.
So that kind of model would have all the advantages of the original Libra idea, but again, it's not this monolithic entity that people were fearing.
It's not its own currency. It's still just pegged to the existing currencies. It's a lot closer to existing stable coins, as we know in the existing digital asset marketplace. Similarly, it's also interestingly quite close to what Binance announced with its Venus project, which is what they wanted to do, a series of digitized sovereign currencies. And again, that might play into the clash of civilizations narrative as well, because it could be seen as Libra helping economies around the world digitize their currencies, much like we're seeing with China doing it themselves with their own government policy. This could be seen as the Western interpretation.
We're offering a service, yes.
Exactly. But certainly has a lot less of the big wow factor and shebang of Libra. I mean, it's not so easily tradable. The fact that I would have to still consider whether I'm trading into euro stable Libra coins from US Libra coins. It might be very easily doable on their network, but you don't start thinking in Libras. You still think tied to your national currencies. Has a lot less of the grandiose elements, a lot closer to PayPal.
Also a lot less of the resistance.
Perhaps so. It might
but anyway, Zuckerberg did not address that explicitly in this.
No, that statement's coming from Marcus. It'll be interesting to see if he addresses that in his statements today.
All right, so we're setting the stage. You think we're going to see some sparks fly today?
I think certainly there will be some strong words thrown. I think the House Financial Services Committee has had a long time since Marcus spoke to think about this project, to do their research, to consider what they want to do, and I think we'll get some very interesting statements today. We'll be covering it live, of course, on BLOCKTV at 10 a.m. Eastern later on.
Of course, and you're going to be in the studio. We're going to take that live on BLOCKTV and on our YouTube. Definitely check us out. We'll be covering that live as it happens later today. For now, thanks for watching. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more blockchain and cryptocurrency news.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter